Today, we're cracking open this 83-page court document, and let me tell you, it tells a wild story. One citizen going up against the state. Now, on the surface, it's about a huge tax bill, but the real fight, it's about a deadline. A rule the government made for itself and then completely blew past.
All right, so let's get right to the number that kicks this whole thing off. An Indonesian citizen named Desi gets a tax bill from the government for 6.7 billion rupiah. To put that in perspective, we're talking about roughly 400,000 US dollars. I mean, that's a life-changing amount of money for pretty much anyone.
But here's the twist that takes this from just another tax dispute and turns it into this fascinating legal puzzle. The court filing says the government's own deadline to even get this bill out the door had expired over a year earlier. So the question at the heart of this whole thing is that bill even legal?
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we have to look at the rulebook. This whole story starts with a totally standard procedure, a tax audit. But as you're about to see, the rules that are supposed to govern that procedure, well, they become the entire battlefield for this case.
So, a tax audit, what is it really? Well, it's pretty simple. It's just the government double-checking your numbers to make sure you've paid what you're supposed to. It's a totally normal process, but, and this is key, it's supposed to follow a very specific set of rules.
And this is absolutely crucial. See, in Indonesia, a tax audit isn't some open-ended investigation that can drag on forever. There's a clock, and that clock starts ticking the second the audit begins.
So let's walk through the legal timeline, according to the documents filed in this case. The audit kicks off on August 30th, 2023. Now, the law says auditors have 6 months to get it done. That puts the first deadline at February 29th, 2024. Okay, but they can get an extension, right? Yep, a maximum of 2 more months. That sets an absolute, final, no more excuses deadline of May 29th, 2024. After that date, the whole thing is legally supposed to be over.
So that date, May 29th, 2024, you got to remember that one. It's basically the legal finish line. Which leads to the big question. What happened when the clock finally ran out?
You ready for this? Absolutely nothing. The final deadline just came and went. No results, no bill, not a single word. Just silence. The legal window had slammed shut, or so it seemed.
So here's what actually went down. That deadline passes in May 2024. Then, crickets. For almost 10 months. It wasn't until March of 2025 that the audit results were finally delivered. And that official 6.7 billion rupiah bill, that didn't show up until June 3rd, 2025.
And that right there brings us to the huge, glaring number at the center of this case, 371 days. That's how long after the legal deadline had expired that the final tax bill was issued. I mean, we're not talking about a small delay here. This is over a year late. So this massive delay, this is the entire foundation of Desi's legal case. Her argument really isn't about whether she actually owes the money. It's about whether the government even followed its own rules to ask for it.
And her legal argument is super straightforward. She's saying that 8-month deadline, it's not a suggestion, it's a hard legal stop sign. And the moment the tax office blew past it, they lost their authority to keep going. That means everything they did after that date, delivering results, holding meetings, and especially issuing that final bill, it's all invalid. The bill, she argues, is basically just a worthless piece of paper.
But the court filing doesn't stop with just the timeline. It really tries to paint a picture of a confusing and, frankly, unprofessional process. At one point, an auditor apparently told her, "Aman bu pasti dibantu," which means, "Don't worry, we'll help you." You can imagine that probably gave her some sense that things were going to be sorted out.
And there are other pretty serious claims in the filing too. She says she was rushed into signing 2 big stacks of documents without any real time to read what was in them. She also admits to giving what's described as thank you money, an ang pao, of 500,000 rupiah to 2 auditors. Then, things get even weirder. She gets this unexplained settlement offer for 490 million rupiah, only for the tax office to turn around and issue the original multi-billion rupiah bill anyway. You can see how all this would just add to her argument that the whole process was broken from the start.
All right, so that's her side. What about the tax authority? How do they defend being over a year late? Well, they have a completely different take on the law. They basically argue that her entire case is built on a misunderstanding of what that 8-month deadline actually means.
Their whole defense hinges on a different, much bigger law, a 5-year statute of limitations. This law, which is a higher-level law than the one setting the audit timeline, essentially gives the tax authority a 5-year window to issue a tax assessment.
Okay, so here's the core of their argument. That 8 months deadline, they say it's just an internal target, a performance goal for their auditors to keep them on track. Missing it, they argue, is an internal issue, maybe something for HR, but it doesn't legally cancel the tax bill. Their real power, they say, comes from that 5-year law. And they claim as long as they did 2 things, deliver the audit results and hold a final discussion, which they did, the bill is totally legit.
And there it is. That's the absolute heart of this entire dispute. You've got 2 totally opposite interpretations of the law. On one side, DESI is saying that 8-month procedural rule is a hard boundary. You cross it, the game is over. On the other side, the tax office is saying, no, the real boundary is our 5-year authority. That 8-month thing, that's just an internal goal.
Okay, let's pull back for a second, because when you really look at it, this case is about so much more than just one person's tax bill. It's asking a really fundamental question about the relationship between a government and the people it governs.
So, yeah, this whole thing, it's not just about DESI's tax bill or a single missed deadline.
It really gets at a fundamental question about how a country that's supposed to be based on the rule of law actually works.
I mean, think about it. The government writes the rules.
And it absolutely expects every single citizen to follow those rules to the letter.
And that leaves us with this huge final question. In a state that's truly governed by law, where does power actually come from? Does it come from broad, sweeping authority, or does it come from following the very same rules that you impose on everybody else? That's the question the court has to answer. And really, it's something every taxpayer has to think about.